Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this wireframe cabochon with a rose on the front of it. So it can look like this. And this is the one I'm going to show you how to make today. So for this one I used a nice and dark gemstone cabochon behind it. So it works perfectly for uniform cabochons colour wise. And then also I've done a different one previously where I use a rose quartz cabochon. So you can see the different looks that you can get just using different materials. And they'll never come out looking exactly the same, which is always nice. So you just capture your cabochon with this frame, but I have a previous tutorial of how to do. So I'm just going to show you the rose part in this one, how to make that. And then obviously as well, what you can do after you've made it, you can use different chains to attach it to a pre-made chain, or you can make your own chain as well. It's completely up to you. This one I just matched the gemstones in the chain to the gemstone cabochon that I used. So if you want to learn how to make this rose on the front of a wire-framed cabochon, then keep watching. So it's these things we'll need to make the rose on the cabochon. So obviously we'll need the cabochon itself, and this is one I have here. This is just a purple agate cabochon. It's got a nice dark purple. It'll go really nicely with the copper there and the wire. And this specific one measures 3 by 4 centimeters in an oval shape. We can use whatever cabochon that you want to. And then as for the wires that I'm using, these are both regular round wire, both gauges here, and I'm working with a copper wire. The first one is a 0.6mm. This is what we're going to make the shape and the frame of the rose with. And then this one is a 0.25mm. This is what we're going to be doing the very fine wrapping with to hold the piece together. So let's get it together and let's get started. So the wires that we'll need is first of all a length of a 0.6mm wire here, and I have about 50 centimeters of this. So that's what I'm working with. If you want a larger rose for something, then use a longer length of 0.6mm or shorter if you want a smaller one. But I'm working with about 50 centimeters. And then we also need a length of a 0.25mm wire here, so the wrapping wire. And I'm working with about 2 meters of this. Now again, it's up to you how much you want to work with. If you don't feel comfortable working with such a long length, you can work with a shorter length and then add in along the way when you run out. I'm going to explain how to do that. But then also, you might just actually not have enough in this anyway, so you can always just add in along the way. But I prefer to use as much as I can. So roughly about 2 meters, but you can always add in if you run out. So then the first thing you need to do before you start making the rose itself is we need to get the cabochon and the frame for the cabochon ready, because we're going to work from that. And that's obviously what's going to hold the piece together. So I have the cabochon here that I'm going to use, and then I've already done the frame. So this is just the point that I'm at now, because before I fasten the cabochon in here, I want to make this decoration on the front. But I already have a tutorial that shows how to make this setting for the cabochon. So if you want to go and have a look at that first, I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below. But I'm ready, basically. I'm just missing the last steps to be able to fasten the cabochon in place. It's going to slide in like this and sit there. But I want to just add the design to the front before I do that. So I have the frame ready to this point, and then what I'm also going to do is we need to be sure we know what the front here of the cabochon is going to be, so the size, so that for me is the inner circle kind of there, or the inner oval shape, because we need to be able to measure against that as we're making the rose to see how large we need to make the rose as we go, because obviously don't want to make it too large or too small. So we need to have this ready first of all. And then how we're going to start off by then making the rose itself is get a length of a 0.6mm wire here. I'm going to start working with this just to begin with. And then the tools I'm going to be using for this is some round nose pliers, and then also some chain nose pliers. So those are the tools I'm going to use to form and shape the rose. So we're going to grab this and then start towards one end of it. And then we're going to start with the round nose pliers here. We want to start out by just making basically a loop. So get right towards the end of the wire and just make a pretty small and fine loop. So you end up with the end basically butting up and going in towards itself. And that's also, we don't have that end sticking out or scratching on anything or catching. So this is the very center of the rose, and we're going to be working outwards from here, and obviously we're using one continuous length of wire. So almost imagine what we're doing is kind of if you were to draw a rose, but in one continuous stroke instead of taking your pencil off the paper. It's basically what we're going to be doing with the wire. So all I want to start doing is start then getting the shape in place. I've switched over to my chain nose pliers, and you want to start manipulating your wire. This is basically just doing it as you go. And you just want to decide how you want yours to look as you go. There is no right and wrong really, because obviously as well it's nature, it's a flower, so it isn't going to be perfect regardless. But then I'm going to start making this more, instead of like a circle in the middle, start making a bit more like an oval shape, so we start getting that inclination of the petals. And come back in. Once you have a bit of shape, come back in towards the middle again, so you kind of have your wire that you're working with also butting up against your inner circle. Once you're there, you want to then continue. This is where then the chain nose pliers come in. Come back out a little bit. To begin with, it's just gentle round curves that we're making. That's just because it's right at the center of the rose. So just shape it a little bit and then start coming further out again, coming back around. So it's basically a spiral we're forming, but just with different twists and turns or shapes within it to give that illusion of petals really. Going back around, and then as you move further and further out, you're going to make the petals gradually larger as well. And now I want to slowly start getting some more angles in there. So instead of having just each petal be round, I'm going to start using my chain nose pliers and then put some more angles in to give more of a natural shape to the petals. And like I said, you just shape this as you go until you're happy with how it looks. You can see we're slowly getting a few more angles in there. But I still don't want to get it too open just yet, because we're still in the center of the rose. So come back in, so that little area wide that we're working with comes back in and kind of meets up right against the next circle in. Keep moving around, then come back out again to form the next petal. Use your chain nose to put gentle angles in there. And you really do it how you feel it's going to look nice. And there isn't really any right or wrong, like I said, that you can really go with this. It's just shaping it as you go. We're getting slowly further and further out, building the shape more and more. Come in and meet and go back out to the next petal. And I feel like we slowly need to start making the petals a little bit larger. And just make them different shapes really. Every petal make that unique, so they don't obviously look like each other. So something like that a bit. And then what I would say is get roughly to a point like this, because then we need to start introducing the weaving wire as well. So when you're roughly at this point, you can see it's starting to take shape, we need to bring in the length of weaving wire. And I'm doing this before we get too far, just because I'm going to be doing it as I go. So do a bit of the shape at a time, then do a bit of weaving, a bit of the shape, and then a bit of weaving. That's how I prefer to do it. So I'm going to start right from the center again. So I want to put my weaving wire, whether you come up or down, it doesn't matter. Just going to start on one end of that weaving wire, work with the tail first, the short tail, and I want to weave this right around the inner circle, the very first little circle that we made, a little loop, basically coiling this weaving wire around that, because I want my coil of weaving to be right up towards the end of the 0.6mm wire as well. That's butting up against itself in that loop. So just take a bit of time. Coiling is around, first of all, the 0.6, a bit away from the end of the wire, because then what we're going to do is wrap it a few times here, and then when you have enough wrapped, we're going to push the coil basically up towards the end. So just keep doing this for a little bit. When you then have a little section of just this 0.25mm wire wrapping around the inner circle of the 0.6, but the reason I said as well to not wrap it all the way towards the end of that 0.6mm wire is because it's just going to pull through where that end is butting up against itself. That's why you just need to wrap it a bit further out, because then we have a little piece here done. We can take that and just push it in so the wrap sits up against the end of the wire. That way you avoid having it pull through and getting difficult to work with. So this is where we're at now. Then what we need to do is continue coiling here and wrapping, but then also start incorporating so we kind of fasten the piece together so it's not going to be one long spiral that can come apart. So what I'm going to do is we need to go to the other tail, so it's going to be the long tail of the 0.25. Now because this is quite fine work, you might have to go to the end to wrap, but then what we need to do to attach it is again continue as if you're coiling around just that single wire, but then every time we then run into a place where you have two wires pretty much meeting against each other. So remember we made each petal and then have the wire come back in and then back out again to make the next petal. When you run into them places, what you want to do is keep coiling with 0.25mm wire around here, but we need to incorporate and take advantage of those places where the wire kind of meets up, the 0.6mm wire meets up with itself. And the way we're going to do that is basically using the figure of 8 weave to connect the two together and make it more solid. So just put it all the way through, and obviously it's going to be a bit much to deal with here at the beginning. The beginning part is always the trickiest because you're dealing with it all and it's still quite a bit loose and that. But just take your time and work with it gently, especially the 0.25 here. You don't want to get any kinks and bends and that. When you then have your wire in position there, so you're in the right place where those two 0.6mm wires meet, to do that figure of 8 weave, I'm coming up kind of basically between the two 0.6mm wires as if we were wrapping them together. Obviously if you're going the other way you can come down between, it doesn't matter at all. But then instead of just coiling around the same one as we've been doing, so the inner circle there, to use that to use the figure of 8 weave, sorry, I'm going to go out to the outer petal out here and down through that. So basically we now can wrap around that next wire out that's running, 0.6mm wire that's running right past the one that we're wrapping in the middle. Pull that down, and then again I'm going to get my end, and then to come around this second one out, so not the inner one but the second one out that we're wrapping now, I'm coming up to wrap around that on its own. So if you're familiar with the figure of 8 weave, it'll make sense, I hope. Come up through, just gently pull your 0.25 mil wire through, and you're pulling this up, and then this wrap you've just done wraps around the second one out. So not the inner circle, but the next one out. And then again, I've just done this once. I'm going to go back through to the inner circle then that I'm already wrapping through. So I'm going to continue the wrap in here, get back to that. But I basically want to connect the next go around out to this inner circle to make it a more solid piece. And I'm going to be doing that throughout. And personally what I like doing, this is just done it once. I personally prefer to do it twice every time my wires meet. So every time you run into there with a petal, starts a new one. So it's the same thing, I'm going to come up as if I were going to just do another wrap. But then before I continue wrapping on the inner circle, like I was and coiling around that, I just want to repeat what I just did. So just wrap around that second wire out one more time. It just gives it a little bit extra stability really. Down through the outer petal. And personally, you can also just wrap around both of them as if they were one, that's fine. Personally though, I'll just feel with the figure of 8 weave, it makes it a bit more seamless and blend in more instead of having that double wrap over both wires. But it's completely up to you. And keep pushing it down so your inner coils stay nice and tight. And come up through same place again, so wrapping around the outer wire this second time. Pull all your wire through, make sure you don't get any kinks. And that. And then just make sure to push all your wraps tight. And then now the inner circle there, from these 2 wraps we just done, are connected to the next kind of circle out that's right next to it. And that's basically the principle of it. So I've done the 2 wraps now to connect them. I'm going to go back to the middle and continue wrapping on there. And then it's just basically continue coiling, the same that I showed you before. Just wrapping around that inner wire over and over again until the next place where you have 2 wires that meet. So where the outer one then forms another petal. And in my case, that is going all the way around over to the opposite side actually. So I'm going to keep wrapping around this inner circle, keep building that coil until I meet the next place where 2 wires are right next to each other. So I'm going to keep doing that. So I now kept wrapping my 0.25mm wire here, the long end, over until, keep coiling it around until I have 2 0.6mm wires again running in right next to each other. So until the outside circle comes 1 petal and comes in and meets up with that to go out and make the next petal. So this is the point again we want to make sure to connect the 2 so it becomes a more solid piece. So in here you can see we have more open space, so it makes it a little bit easier. So around the outside one I'm currently coming up in between the 2 with my 0.25. So just take that and go around the outside one, easily there. But then we do have to go back to the end now to find the end again of your 0.25 to then come back up through the gap here on the inside to be able to wrap around the inside and then come back through and wrap around one more time. Just like I did on the other one. I personally prefer to do it twice like I said, it just gives a little bit more stability. Especially because we're working with such fine wires here. Like that. That was once. I now need to just go around the inside again. So go back to the end of your 0.25. Go back on the inside at the point where you got to from just coiling around the inside circle there. Go down through again. Pull all the way through nice and gently so you don't get any kinks. So for instance somewhere like here, if I kept pulling this, this would form a kink and it would make a weakness in the wire. You want to avoid that. So if you catch something like that, you need to make sure that you catch it and then before you keep pulling it that you undo it. So just by pushing it the opposite way. So undo it and then you can keep pulling. Because if you do get a kink like that and you just pull it, it's going to make a weakness in the wire, it's going to make it more likely that it'll break. So you want to try and avoid that. So again, back to the end. Come back up through this gap out here, between the 2 wires basically. Pull through. So we can then wrap around the outside wire a second time. And I still have my tail in here by the way as well, from the original starting point. I like to leave that on for a while at least. Probably won't cut it off till the end. Just so you have something to hold on to. Like that. And then back around the outside one again. So just go around the outside. Nice open space. With that figure of 8 weave, like I explained. To make it nice and seamless. Find the end, come back up through the gap again. Pull all the way through. Come up there. And then finally, the last step to connect these 2 is just to go back down through to go around the inside again. So you can go back to just coiling around that, continue the coil that you were doing before. We just incorporated that second wire into it. So that's basically the goal. And that's the principle of the whole thing. You basically just keep doing that. Pull it gently, and then we're back along the inside again. And you just pick up your wrapping back up the way it was, coiling around until you run into the next place where you have two wires that meet each other. So that's the basic principle of making the rows. So you just keep building that, and then when you get to this point where, move around to the next side and you get over here, when you then get to that point where on the outside you don't have any more petals, you need to then just make a bit more of your rows. So shape a bit more with a 0.6mm wire, and then you can pick back up the weaving again. So you build your rows in this way. So then what I just want to mention as well, if you'll find that you'll run into this, I run into my first one now. If you remember the very first time I wrapped the two wires together to connect them, I run back into that now, but on the outside wire that we wrapped around just twice before, and went back to coil around the inside one. I run back into that point now, but on the outside wire. So what I've done is I kept coiling all the way up to I run into them, so I can't have any more space to coil on the underside of that. So what we need to do now is move over to be able to continue coiling on the other side. All you do with that is you just want to grab your weaving wire here. I've still got this open space, so you can just take advantage of that whenever you have that, instead of always having to go to the end. I'm bringing that up as if I'm going to continue coiling around the base wire that I'm currently coiling around to reach the next point where I have two wires meeting up. And all you want to do is take this weaving wire behind those two wraps. So you're going to have a front and a back to your rows here, so you just want to decide that. Make sure you always do this on the same side, because then that's going to be the inside of the rows. It's going to be against the cabochon, so you won't be able to see it once we're done. But obviously until then you can. Just make sure you always do it on the same side. And then I'm just going to continue coiling just like before with my weaving wire, but on the other side of those two wraps. Just pull it all the way through. And then as I'm tightening this wrap, it's just going to come and continue on the other side of those two wraps that are connecting two wires. And then if you look closely on yours, you'll be able to see that your weaving wire just kind of comes around the back of them. But like I said, that's going to disappear once we attach this and place the cabochon in as well. So that's just how you get across that point where you have two wires connected, and you come across it on the outside wire. So you then just keep going, doing the same technique, building one or a few petals at a time, wrapping a bit, making sure you connect them, and the points where your wire meets with in between the petals there. And then you'll get something that's going to start to look like a rose here. It'll get larger and larger. And then also what I just want to say is you can add a new wire, like I said, if you run out, or if you don't feel comfortable working with too long a length of your weaving wire. So what you just do is you want to get to a point where you've got a short piece left, and then maybe a join, just before a join where you've already wrapped them together. You want to then just cut it off towards the back. Make sure you have that, you decided which one is the back. Cut it off there, very short tail, and then just squeeze it down with your chain nose pliers, and that way tuck it away, because this is the back that's going to be against the cabochon, so that way the ends won't be sticking out and catching. And then on the other side of the join, you just start a new wire doing the exact same thing, and then continue with your weaving. And then once you get to a point where you feel it's getting big enough, you want to obviously start measuring your rows as well against your cabochon and your frame here. So that's why you want to get this ready first, like I said. Then pop it in, and then you just want to start measuring this on top to see how it's going to sit, and if we're going to get to the right size, because you obviously don't want to then end up making it too big. So you want the edges of your rows to meet up with the edges here on the inside of your frame, and then you need some connection points there to be able to hit against the frame. So it's going to sit like this. So I've reached the perfect size now for mine. It's going to sit like this. So I know that I've got the right size. So once you get to this point where you know you don't really want to go any larger, obviously we're not going to keep making petals with this 0.6mm wire then. So you just want to make your very last one, connect it on the inside row that you were doing, and then instead of continuing making petals and connect your wires with your 0.25 there as you go, what you just want to then do is just keep wrapping on the outside edge here without connecting, obviously. So you just want to go over the points that you already connected previously. So that just means I'm just missing a little bit here, the very last petal that I'm going to wrap. So it just means you take your 0.25mm wire, keep wrapping, and I'm right by join here, right in front of it. So I need to get right up against it, doing the exact same thing, filling in the gap up before the join. See if I can get one more, possibly. Yep, and the last wrap just before the join here, the very last join, apart from the last one obviously, but we don't have any wire on the other side of that once we cut it off. I'm leaving the tail of the 0.6mm wire on for now though, so leave that on until we've fully wrapped it, and then you just do the same thing, go underneath to the other side of the join and down through the next petal to continue wrapping the exact same way. And that's just how you do the outside edge. So the exact same thing, except you don't have to connect your two wires together, the 2.6mm wires, because you've already done that and there is no more petals to connect. You just fill in the rest of the space until you've wrapped the whole entire thing and you have no more bare wire left of your 0.6mm apart from the tail you have left, obviously. So I've now kept wrapping there and I've completed my rose, and I know it's done, it fits in the size as well. So all I have to do is just get rid of these tails, the very first one that we left, and obviously the rest of our working wire as well. So what I'm going to do is go in and grab my cutters. I like to use my flush cutters, and again on the back you want to make sure to cut them off on the back. Just cut it down very close to where it's coming out, and grab your chain nose, and then the very end there, just tuck it in. So basically just squeeze it down best you can. The same with the very end here. Cut it off, the excess, and then squeeze that down as well. So just grab onto the very end, tuck it in and roll it out a little bit in the same direction that your wire has been wrapped. There we go. You can always run your finger over it if you can feel it, you can tuck in a bit more. But like I said, it's not too big a deal because that's the back that's going to be against the cabochon. It's going to lie on top like that. So this is where we're at now. What I'm also going to do then is get rid of the excess of my 0.6. All we're going to do with that is the very last wrap that we did here for the very last petal. I'm just going to go in, take my flush cutters. Again, I prefer to use my flush cutters for this. You get a nice clean cut. And then just cut off right on the other side of that very last wrap. Just get as close as you can without cutting into any of your other work, so the 0.25mm or anything, like that. And then you can always, if you have a bit too much left, you can go in and just cut off a little bit more if you feel that you need to. But then that's finished, and because we're finished there on a petal, it kind of just blends in nicely like that. So this is your final rose now. What we need to do now is connect this to the frame so we can then end up placing the cabochon in and get a finished piece. So then to start attaching our rose onto the frame there, first of all what I'm just going to do is again get my frame and the cabochon, put the cabochon inside of it just to make sure that I know this is how it's going to sit. And then I want to take my rose, place it on there how I want it to sit, so I know I want mine to sit like that on the frame, the cabochon, and look like that. And then I'm just, because if you can tell obviously this is flat now, we need to just have it a little bit of curve so it fits around the domed cabochon. So I'm just going to gently take it and just press it a little bit along the sides, press it against the cabochon, and so the sides there that's going to be connected to the frame actually come down towards the frame a bit. And then just gently press it into shape. You can also just press it over your cabochon if you want to get that dome shape, or even just use your hands if you feel more comfortable with that. You might have a bit of a gentle or delicate stone, so you can just do that. And then we just have a very gentle curve in it that's going to then end up sitting nicely shaped across and on top of that cabochon there. So now to start connecting the rose here onto the frame. And obviously keep this handy because we just need to make sure we place it how we want it to sit, and we know we have the right shape now. So what we need to get for that is another length of a 0.25mm wire here, and you can either just cut another short length. It doesn't have to be that much we're working with, just a comfortable length to work with here, because we're just attaching it. Or quite often if you have a little bit left from making the rose at the end there and you cut that off, you can just use the rest of that as well. So first off, I'm just going to place it up against here just to see exactly where I want it placed, because I want it to sit nicely and balanced in the middle. So something a bit like this, because I just need to check where I need to start attaching my wire. So sit roughly like here. So you just want to choose anywhere to start from, it doesn't matter. I'm going to start over on this side, so the right side here, and just get it placed right. Something like this. And then the first place that I can see one of my petals on my rose meet up with the frame, that's the first place where I want to attach them. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to remember where on the frame that is. Put my rose to the side because I want to start attaching this wire to the frame. So what we're doing is on your frame here, where I showed in my previous video that I'm going to put a link to the description box below how to make this, the very inner kind of circle you can see is what we're going to be attaching. So the base wire on this, it's only the very inner one we're going to be wrapping around, not all three of them. So again, I'm just going to take this 0.25mm wire and wrap it around, leave a little tail. You can just use that to begin with. Just coil it around just like we're basically doing with the rose. To first of all get this attached. This can be a little bit fiddly because obviously it's not a finished piece yet. But attach your wire here, wrapping around a few times. In the space or the gap you have on your frame in between the weave that you've made here. Again, make sure they're nice and neat next to each other. And push them tight as well. So you can see we're wrapping it right in that little gap. It's moving in between there. And you can just fill that out a bit until we feel it's nicely attached. I want to say a minimum of about 3 wraps, but maybe a few more if you can, if you feel like you've got space for it. Because then once we have it attached, we then have the long tail left. I'm just going to push this to the back, the short tail, get it out of the way. We then have this long tail left that we can then use to attach to the rose. So again, get my rose out. Now like I said, the first one is going to be most difficult because it's a bit fiddly, because it's 2 loose pieces here. You can always move your wires around, open things up if you need to make it more comfortable and easy to work with. Place your rose where that first petal meets the point where you're wrapping, and then what I'm going to be using here is a figure of 8 weave again to wrap. So on the rose itself, if you remember where we had the join 2 wires together, it's that same principle, wrapping around the 2 wires to connect them. It's the exact same thing. So you have to check what direction your wire is coming. Mine is coming from the side, wrapping around the top, so I need to come behind the rose and up from the bottom in this case, going around through the correct petal, and it's this top one. Yep, the one up here. Just going to come up now to begin with through that petal, pull it all the way through, don't get any kinks, and then gently place your rose there where it's going to sit. And then we need to come back down on the side of the rose, and then, because we're going around the outside of the rose, go back the inside of the frame and back through that same space that we're using to wrap, and attach the 0.25mm wire. So it's just having a look where your wire is going, what direction it's going, to make sure you do that figure of 8 wrap. So like that, and then we're tightening this up gently. Just make sure it sits exactly how you want it to sit. So something a bit like this. Then when you're happy with that, then what you want is make sure before you pull this tight, you want to make sure that your weaving wire there is going to catch in the exact right place. because then we have the very tip of that petal. What you do is you pull tight, because then you'll probably hear or feel like a little snap, and then that means that your weaving wire that you're using to attach the rose to the frame has gone in between the wrap you did on your rose and kind of snapped into place, and that way it really blends in perfectly as well, so you won't be able to see it obviously. Now what I prefer to do is do this twice per place where I'm connecting them. So I'm coming around the side again of the frame. You need to go up through the bottom of the rose, pull it all the way up through, and then just gently get your wire into position before you pull anything tight. You can use tools to help you as well, to push your weave, your wraps here on the side nice and tight as well, to make it nice and even looking. Like that. So we're now ready to again go around the outside of the rose, but then come through the inside of the frame in that very same place. And if you feel like you're short for space, using something like pliers or your chain nose pliers to get in there and help guide your wire can be really helpful as well, because obviously there's not that much space that we're working with, so sometimes your fingers can't really get in where you want your wire to go. So use your chain nose to help guide your wire into place, obviously gently because it is a 0.25. So like that. And again, when you're happy with where the wire sits, you just pull it, give a nice tight tug, and then you'll hear or feel a little snap, and the wire that we're using to wrap is going to dig itself in right in between the other wraps on the rose. So I'm happy with that. That's 2 now. It's going to be nice and secure for this one. Then all I want to do is finish off this wrap and secure area by just going around the frame a couple of times again to basically finish off this connection point. So I'm now just wrapping around the frame, so the inner wire on the frame by itself, and doing a few wraps just like we did in the beginning. I always want to make sure to have a few wraps on their own whenever you finish off or start off a wire. So just do this a couple of times. So when you then attach that and you wrap that extra few times here, you can see the rose is pretty secure with that one alone, but doing all of them make it really nice and secure on there. So what I'm going to do is we just, for this one wrapping point, we just need to finish off our wire here, because I'm happy with how it sits. So you want to make sure that your wires are finished in the inside of your frame. That's where your ends are coming out. I'm just going to show you on this. And then all you want to do is again get your cutters, like use my flush cutters, wherever the wire's coming out from, go in as close as you can, cut off the excess, and then take your chain nose pliers, find that end, and then just make sure to squeeze it down in the same direction that it would be wrapping. Because then again, by finishing off the wire here on the inside of the frame, your ends of your wire is on the inside of both the frame and obviously the rose as well. So it's not going to catch or scratch on anything as it's being worn. So it's going to make it much more nice and secure to wear as well, and more comfortable. So that's how you finish off your wires. Obviously do the other one, and then you want to keep going around on every point of your rose that meets up with the frame. So just not ones that are kind of too far out, but ones that meet up nicely with the frame there on the sides, and connect all those in the exact same way. And then once you've done that, you have your rose connected to your frame. So I've now completely attached my rose to the frame here, and it's on there really nice and securely, as you can see. So even though we're using that fine wire, because we're attaching it at so many points along the side, it's going to work really well. And also we're going to have, it's not going to be just freestanding, because obviously we have the cabochon here. So we can now place that in, because we have the basic design done and the frame as well. So like the frame and the bail there that I showed you how to make in a different video. So that's what it's going to look like on the front. You have your nice silhouette of a rose there. And then all that's left to do is finish off your actual setting for the cabochon. So it's really up to you how you want to do that. I also show how I've done that in the video where I show how to make the frame, so you can go back there and have a look if you want to. Or you can just make your own design. All you need to do is make some kind of design that's going to fasten the back here, so obviously the cabochon will stay in place. and then it's going to look like this. So when you then finished off your back as well and secured the cabochon in place, I've done mine like this, then you'll have your finished cabochon with a rose motif there on the front. Give a nice effect, and this is perfect to do on a stone, a cabochon there that's just all the same colour. So for instance, this one I used a nice dark stone, but then also on previous one I've done, I did it in front of a rose quartz cabochon. So it can give completely different looks depending on what stones and materials that you use. And also now all you need to do is put this in some kind of chain. So you can either just use a pre-made chain or you can make your own chain like I did with this one. So I actually use the gemstones in the chain to match the cabochon. So it's obviously something you can do, it's completely up to you. I have different examples of these chains on my channel if you want to have a look at that, on how to make them yourself. But then that's how you make this wire wrapped cabochon in a frame with a rose on the front there. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make this love and heart design on the front of a cabochon setting. And this is what it looks like. So you have your word love there with wire writing, and then all your hearts put together. And this is all made with one length of wire, so I'm going to show you how to do this. So this is the design I'm going to show you, and what I've already done is a video tutorial on how to make the actual setting for the cabochon. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below. But if you want to learn how to make this